Welcome, everyone, to the PCI Practical Matters podcast. Today we have Tim Sullivan speaking on the 10 myths of government contracting. This is myth number 1. Take it away, Tim.
Thank you, Fritz. Let's start with myth number 1, which is we should never protest. Look, I understand that filing a bid protest can be an intimidating experience. For one thing, you might have to hire a lawyer. And for some people, even the thought of suing a customer, or in most cases here, a potential customer, is something that spooks them. So they just take the position, we're not going to do it. And let's face it, bid protests are not part of the commercial marketplace. It does not happen there. Now, the world of government contracting is not the commercial marketplace. And bid protests are things that come with the territory. Most bid protests relating to a U.S. government contract are filed in one of 3 separate forums. You can file at the contracting agency. You can file at the Government Accountability Office. We know that as the GAO. Or you could file at the United States Court of Federal Claims, each with different rules, each with different deadlines, some of which you can move on to a different forum if you don't like their results, but we won't get into the details of that today. But those are the big 3. Now, as I said, each forum presents different challenges to a protester and its own set of rules. And prudent companies select their forum only after consulting experienced counsel. You notice I use the word experience, someone who knows their way around these 3 places. Some agencies, though, like the FAA and the Postal Service, have their own rules and their own protest forums. So if you're doing business with either of those 2 agencies, again, your lawyers should understand that there is a different forum and they should understand the rules of that forum. Now, we don't have any data on the success rate of agency level protests. So if I've lost out on an Army procurement at the Army Materiel Command and I file a protest with the agency, we don't have statistics on how those pan out. But in the last fiscal year, the fiscal year that ended on September 30th, 2023, for example, the GAO closed 2,041 protests, issuing decisions in 608 of them. So they've been busy. The GAO, of those 608 decisions that were issued, sustained 31% of the protests on the merits. But perhaps even more important is what GAO calls their effectiveness rate. That rate includes the protests that either resulted in voluntary agency action, so they say they'll take corrective action, which moots the protest, or a GAO decision sustaining the protest. In that last completed fiscal year, 57% of the protests filed at the GAO resulted in corrective action. That is the effectiveness rate. So compared to courts around the country, compared to almost any other forum you can think of, that's a pretty high success rate. So these statistics show that there are a lot of companies filing protests. And these protests are often effective, and they deserve a second look if you have shied away from them in the past. Now, if I haven't changed your mind yet, and I'll bet I haven't for some of you, here's another reason for you to at least study the protest process. What if you have just been awarded a major contract, one that your company has been working on for years, and you finally got it, and a disappointed offeror, a loser, files a protest against that award? Is it your plan to sit back and let the government defend against the protest? You and the government have different interests, as many such awardees have found out. So perhaps you would want to consult experienced counsel before you make this decision as to whether you're going to intervene or not. Now, there are essentially 2 kinds of protests. Protests that challenge the terms of a solicitation are the first kind, and then those that challenge an agency's award to a competitor. Now, with respect to the first type, challenging the terms of a solicitation, it is critical to understand that any challenge to the terms of a solicitation must be filed before proposals are due. That is one of the cardinal rules in the bid protest world. If you're going to challenge the terms of a solicitation, you've got to do that before proposals are due. Now, many companies actually, we know this from experience, actually spot problems in an RFP, but decide not to raise them for fear that they would rock the boat. Say, for example, that you notice that the only way that an offeror would be able to be evaluated as excellent for past performance in a particular procurement is if it is the incumbent contractor. You go, now you're not the incumbent. You go to your management and you point this out to them and you suggest that you might want to file a protest challenging this. They tell you, oh no, we don't want to rock the boat. Of course, they're not in the boat, right? Only the incumbent contractor's in the boat here. But instead they say, let's just keep this issue in our back pocket in case we lose. And then we can file our protests. But if we win, then no worries. Okay. So, of course, the point here is that you are not in the boat. Your company isn't in the boat. Only the incumbent is. But even worse, if you follow the strategy that your management wants you to follow, and you file that protest after you learn that the incumbent has been awarded the contract, even a government lawyer in their first week on the job is going to move to dismiss the protest on the grounds that it is untimely because your protest was based on something that was apparent from reading the solicitation. And your failure to protest before proposals were due is fatal to your cause. And they will win. So here's what experienced companies do. First, they review a solicitation carefully and they make notes on any troublesome points. Second, they try to resolve ambiguities, discrepancies, or contradictions by applying what we call the order of precedence clause that is in every federal government solicitation and contract. Third, they prepare a list of questions to submit to the agency contracting officer, and they submit those questions by the deadline stated in the RFP, if there is one in the RFP, or certainly well enough ahead of the proposal due date to give the agency adequate time to respond to the question. In other words, don't wait until the morning offers are due or 2 hours before offers are due to send in your list of questions. Fourth, if the agency fails to answer the question or responds in an unsatisfactory way, probably the most galling is the agency response that says the RFP speaks for itself. So if they fail to answer the question or respond unsatisfactorily, your company then has to decide whether A, to take a pass on the opportunity because it's not worth the risk, B, submit a proposal in spite of the risk, but being careful to explain your interpretation of the language in question and how your proposal is based on that interpretation, or third, file a protest, again, before offers are due. Now, this is primarily a business decision, but it should be made with the assistance of experienced counsel. So that's the first type of protest, challenging the terms of a solicitation. The second type of protest is where we challenge an agency's award to a competitor, and that usually focuses on whether the agency's actions were consistent with the terms of the solicitation and complied with the applicable regulations. Now, in order to prevail in this kind of protest, a protester must show two things. First, that the agency materially deviated from the RFP or the regulations, and that action on the part of the agency or failure on the part of the agency prejudiced the protester. So their action was prejudicial to the protester. As part of that challenge, you got to realize that agency contracting officers are given a great deal of discretion, in the execution of their duties. This is something that's given to them under what's called the Administrative Procedure Act. And the GAO and the courts do not like to substitute their judgment for the judgment of the agency officials, but they will if the facts demand it. In fiscal year 23, the one most recently completed, the three most frequently cited reasons for sustaining protests at the GAO were, first, unreasonable technical evaluations, second, flawed selection decisions, and third, unreasonable cost or price evaluation. Now, in most negotiated procurements, a protest cannot be filed until after a disappointed offeror has had its debriefing. This is a critical step in the process, and experienced contractors know that they should file a written request for debriefing immediately after they receive a notice of award to a competitor. Do not delay in doing that. You have a 3-day deadline. Don't wait till the 3rd day. Experienced offerors also know that they need to prepare for their debriefing, knowing what information they're entitled to and preparing a list of appropriate questions beforehand. So the completion of the debriefing triggers the short protest time period, and every day counts. I'm not going to get into the protest filing deadlines here, discussing myth number 1, because that is a topic for another program. But you should take a look at FAR Part 33 or go to the GAO's excellent website to learn about the GAO's rules and deadlines. Once again, working with an experienced lawyer, a lawyer who is going to say, this is not my first rodeo, working with them at this point is a smart move. So summing up, if you and your company have a we never protest attitude, that is just fine by me. That's your decision. But just remember that most of your competitors take the opposite view. And knowing what a protest involves can be very helpful to you if you are at the receiving end of a protest. Whatever you decide, good luck.